back to Marriage Sensation. We are a marriage ministry out of New Life at Calvary Church on 79th and Euclid Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm Katy Glenn.
And I'm Walter Glenn.
And we're glad to have you back with us today. Our message today, or our session, is going to be on what does my marriage owe me?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I don't think initially it starts out that way. I think initially we go through that honeymoon phase and there's, oh, I just love you so much and I love you and, oh, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. But then as marriages age into each other, as the marriages go 5 years, 10, 15, 30, 50, we can develop a mentality of a debt and a debtor. And a debt is something that's owed, and a debtor is the person that owes it. And so marriages can subtly creep into that philosophy of what does this person owe me? And you know, it's interesting because, as I said, it doesn't start out that way, but over time, maybe I'm a stay-at-home husband and she's a working wife and she's bringing home the majority of the income, and she looks and says, well, I'm bringing home the majority of the income, I should have some privileges in this marriage. Or maybe it's the husband, you know, saying, hey, I went into this marriage thinking that we were going to have sex 5 times a week, and we're only having sex twice a week. So is this marriage shortchanging me? Am I being shortchanged in this situation?
And really what all of that says is that it centers around your expectations of your marriage. You know, you expected this to happen or that to happen, and it's like, you know, if your spouse doesn't do that, it's like, well, you know, you owe me this because of, you know, these expectations.
It was an unmet expectation.
An unmet expectation. So that is what that whole idea, concept is centered around.
Yeah, it could be, I went into this marriage thinking I would have financial security.
Right.
The moment I married you, I didn't think I'd have to work another day in my life. It could be all kinds of issues where we go into the marriage and it develops into a debtor relationship. Now, here's where that robs the marriage. Because let's say, for the sake of an example, I owe Katy $100. And I run into some money and I say, okay, maybe the payment time frame to pay her back was 1 month. But I run into some money tomorrow and I just say, well, let me get some flowers for my wife. And I go and I get some flowers and I bring them in and, you know, I present them to her. Well, where it robs us is she can sometimes not see that as a gift. She can see that as a repayment of what's owed. And so does that make sense? The concept of if a person feels like they're owed something, you can be giving them a nice side gift and it's not perceived as a gift. It's perceived as you still owe me. You know,
right.
you know, or if I gave her $10 and she could think, well, you know what? Yeah, but you still owe me 90. That's not, it doesn't become, it takes the mentality of it's not a gift, it becomes a payment. And so when marriages fall into that category, they get into some dangerous ground because what we do for each other can be a gift, and oftentimes it is a gift.
Yeah, and sometimes when you think about that and, you know, this debtor relationship, it takes away the love that you have for each other. It kind of, your love tank starts to empty because of something like that, you know, especially with the other person who is just, you know, giving it as a gift and not thinking that, gee, I owe you this because of those expectations you had. So what we need to do is to always put God in any situation.
Well, Jesus is our model. Let's kind of look at how Jesus gave to us. And, you know, when we examine that relationship, we see that Jesus didn't come to earth to be served, but to serve. So there was no debtor relationship, even though he was the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And so he should be the model for how our marriages should reflect the same philosophy that Jesus had about us. We should have that about our marriages.
So Jesus' command to us was to love each other as he loved us. And he just loved us unconditionally. And that's how we should treat each other, because that's the way Jesus treated us.
And Jesus said, right before leaving earth, he said, a new commandment I give you.
Right.
Love one another. And that wasn't a new commandment. That was an old commandment in the Old Testament, that you should love one another. But he said, then he added a part to it. Love one another as I have loved you. And
right.
That's what made it very specific, and that's what made it very, very challenging and powerful.
Right. And, you know, when you hear the words of Jesus, that's also God speaking to us.
Yes.
God speaking to us. And, you know, why did God love us? Why did what did God do to love us?
Well,
His creation.
I think he showed us great humility.
Right.
The mere fact in Philippians 2, where Jesus did not consider equality with God something to be grasped or held on to, but humbled himself and made himself a servant. He humbled himself right. to the most humiliating death you could have, death upon a cross, and he made himself a servant. Right. And so, humility. Right. What marriage couldn't use a dose of extra humility from right. time to time, right. where we don't have this prideful attitude like I'm owed this, right. but this is a gift.
And you know, not only was he humble for us, but he was generous with us.
Generous.
He was forgiving.
Let's just go one by one. Generous. I mean,
he gives us everything that we need.
God gives us everything. Without the air we breathe, the sunshine, the flowers, everything. God gives everything to us, everything we need. He gives us life.
And I always pray in the morning for God I say, God, give us everything that we need today, but also a little bit of what we want. Because that kind of gives you satisfaction that you're getting a little bit of what you want already, so you don't have to worry about your needs.
But then again, that's where you see the generosity of
right,
God.
right.
Because we do get all that we need and a lot of what we want. I mean,
right.
he's so generous.
And he's also so forgiving. Because we, you know, are continuously sin against God. Maybe little things, but you know, God does not like sin, but he has forgiven us.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think most marriages could use a little bit of generosity?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, now you're saying forgiveness. Do you think marriages could use some forgiveness from time to time?
Yes, we have to forgive each other all the time because of just the little things we may say or do or snap at each other. And we have to be able to, you know, stop and forgive that person, or, you know, forgive ourselves for doing whatever, because this is something that God has always and continues to do for us.
Well, there's sins of omission and sins of commission. There's sins we know about and sins we're doing and are hurting people and we don't even know that we're doing it. So we're always going to have an opportunity to forgive each other.
Right.
So we've said God was humble, God was generous, God was forgiving. All those traits need to be present in a marriage.
Right.
Let's go on.
He's also very patient with us.
Oh, come on.
Very kind. And we have to remember that Jesus put himself on the cross so that we wouldn't have to. And he paid the price of sin for us. He died for us. That's how much he loves us, and how we should really try and love each other that same way.
Well, marriage is the illustration that the Bible uses to represent the relationship between God and Christ and his people. He uses the marriage illustration. And Jesus wasn't on the cross looking down at the folks saying, you owe me, you owe me, you owe me. No, he was saying, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Yeah.
Jesus is clearly our model in marriage for how we should operate in marriage, the traits that we need, the characteristics that we need in marriage.
Right. And with Jesus dying on the cross, that wasn't the end of the story. You see, he came back to life.
Amen.
To repair that broken relationship between God and us. He came back to help us to help us put that relationship
put it
back together
in a rightful place with God.
Exactly.
We were sinners. God was holy. There needed to be somebody to come and bridge the gap between us, and that was the form of Jesus Christ. He bridged that gap. And you get to, when you mention his death, you get to the really, really strong final point of what we're talking about. We talked about humility. We talked about forgiveness. We talked about generosity. We talked about patience and kindness. But who is willing to die for people? But yet that's what the scripture tells us to do. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. He was willing to die for the church. Wives, respect your husbands as is fitting to the Lord. So when we get into that conversation, we see that there's a lot of emphasis on just understanding that we don't owe each other anything. It's a gift. Now, yes, we do owe each other respect, and we owe each other certain things on that level, but we're talking about when we go into a marriage and think that this marriage owes me something, we have to get to the place where we have the mentality of Jesus Christ, where we need to be giving the marriage something.
So what should we do for our marriages? What should we do for our marriages? All the same things Jesus did for us. Absolutely. This is why it's so important to have God in your marriage, in your relationship, because he's teaching us how to love one another as he has loved us.
Yeah, President John F. Kennedy once made a statement, ask not what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country? And I would rephrase that statement. Ask not what your marriage can do for you, and that's oftentimes what we go into marriage thinking, what can my marriage do for me? But what can we do for our marriage to make it better? And what we can do is exemplify the traits that Jesus Christ exemplified on earth for us.
So what we're going to challenge you to do something about this. We want you to work on one or two of those characteristics. Being patient, kind, forgiving, generous,
humble, loving.
For each month for the rest of the year, work on that relationship. Work on one of those characteristics, and just see what will happen. You will see. I believe you will see a change.
I think it will revolutionize our marriages.
Exactly.
It'll revolutionize our marriages when we start acting towards our marriage the same way Jesus acted and committed himself to us.
Right. So what we asked the question again, what does this marriage owe me? The answer is that we put into our marriages what Jesus has put into us.
Absolutely. That's what the
marriage. To do for our spouses what Jesus has done for us as a people.
Amen. Well, this concludes our time together today. Your marriage matters to us.
Yes.
And as always, we want your marriage to be sensational.